Here he is, former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, and that's relevant here today.
Mm-hmm.
The most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, Mr. John Shannon, who is in Edmonton. How are you?
Greetings, boys. Doing great.
Good.
Did you see the column from Jonas Siegel on the Toronto Sports Media blog about Hockey Night in Canada turned boring? John,
I did. Yeah.
Penny, for your thoughts.
Boy, Jonah has always done great work, but the reaction to this one was unbelievable. It was amazing.
Sure was. Penny, for your thoughts.
Well, it's a different landscape than when I ran the show. It's a different landscape than when the guy who really created the show of record, and that was the great late Ralph Mellanby. It's now at a point where there's hockey 7 days a week, and no matter how hard you try, it's difficult to differentiate the days, and that's a challenge. That is truly a challenge. Not to pump our own tires, but we used to view our lives at Hockey Night as the punctuation mark at the end of the sentence. Everything would happen in the hockey world Sunday through Friday, and then let's wait and see what happens on Saturday and how the people at Hockey Night respond. Before I got there as exec, Don Cherry was part of that exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. We added the satellite hot stove to be another punctuation mark at the end of the sentence. I don't know where the sentence ends anymore when it comes to hockey and television, and so I think it puts people in a really difficult position. And the Rogers people who have invested millions and millions of dollars in technology now have the unenviable task of trying to serve all these markets at the same time. It is not easy to do, and that's a real challenge.
I think it's honestly in a lot of cases, and there's people have opinions on personalities on their broadcasts, and that's a part of it. But I wonder if a large part of this is the branding part of it, and that they tune into the regional broadcasts, and it's the blue and red of Sportsnet. They tune in on Saturday, it's the blue and red of Sportsnet. Like it just looks the same, and it just tricks the brain in a lot of ways into thinking there is absolutely nothing to, despite the fact Kevin BX is only there on 1 day a week, there's nothing different in what I'm watching, even though it is. But, I think the aesthetic is a big part of it. Like Prime did a great job last night. And that's what's also kickstarted this conversation this week, is that people are getting more and more of a look at the Prime. It's just a different brand. It's a different look. It's a different set. And I wonder if it's as base as that, John, that, they just see the same, even though the personalities might be different.
Yeah, Blake, there's a point. By the way, it is much easier to do one game on a Monday night, night, than it is to do 5 on a Saturday. And that's the huge challenge. I mean, the first intermission of a Saturday night, you feel you're in a position you have to address what happened in the Maple Leaf game, what you address in the Montreal game. You have to address the 2 afternoon games that involve Canadian teams, Ottawa and Edmonton, and then you have to promote the 2 late games. And it is a Rubik's cube to do, and to even think you're going to please one group of hockey fans is difficult when you have 7 in our country, because there are now 7 separate groups of hockey fans in our country. It is a huge challenge. It's an unenviable task in order to try to do that.
It's funny. I watched a fantastic documentary the other day on Netflix about a Harvard professor who wrote a book years ago called Bowling Alone. And the theory was that there are more bowlers, there are just fewer bowling leagues. And he talked about how we have become increasingly isolated, increasingly more detached from our communities, and technology has been a big driver of that. Hockey Night in Canada used to be an event, and it used to be an event because you didn't get all those games during the week. And so because you might root for a certain team, but you're only getting hockey so many nights a week, you would watch the Habs game or you would watch the Leafs game. Whereas these days, you're far more likely to just watch your own team, regardless of where they appear on the weekly schedule. So I'm just not sure there's any way to recapture that sense of event that Hockey Night in Canada was back in the day on a Saturday.
I think that might be a simple explanation as anything. When it was Don became an event. Don was that event, whether you agreed with him, whether you disagree with him, whether you agree with him now or disagree with him now. Don Cherry created that. And let's face it, Don Cherry was an invention of the time at Hockey Night where the Maple Leafs were bad. Pure and simple, the Maple Leafs of the 80s were bad. And we ended up sitting around a boardroom and Mellenby said, we've got to program our intermissions better because the hockey's not going to help us. So you ended up spending a lot more time in programming the intermissions. And again, what we did, and there's another story part of this too, Maddie. We then did the same thing with the satellite hot stove. It had basically Cherry had nothing to do with the games that you were watching, whether you were watching the Montreal game or the Toronto game or the Vancouver game at that point. Same thing for the hot stove. We used to tape the hot stove at 3 p.m. and pray that there was no news. And if there was news, then we had to juggle balls. The other issue that has become a factor is the doubleheader that started in 1995 has reignited the Toronto Maple Leafs as a national brand. And the whole goal was to give Vancouver and Calgary and Edmonton their own teams in their own prime times. And it hasn't worked as effectively as it was once thought to have, because everybody likes watching hockey earlier in the evening. We were trained as kids in your market to watch hockey at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock was when Hockey Night in Canada started. Those are the types of things that have not really changed from viewing habits. It was great in my hometown, Oliver, British Columbia. You'd watch Hockey Night in Canada, then you'd go watch the local high school basketball team after the game. And that was what the traditions were. What has happened now is the Maple Leafs, because they are on every Saturday night at 4 Pacific, every Saturday night, 4 Pacific, the Maple Leafs are on. They have been reignited as a national brand. And I think that might have an adverse effect. And that was long before Rogers took over.
When Rogers first took over Hockey Night in Canada, that Hockey Night in Canada brand lived on, I thought, independently for a few more years.
Despite the move from Ron to Strombo.
Right. Yeah. I almost wonder if they should, it doesn't have to go back to that brand, but I wonder if that helps, if differentiate it, making it look different. I know they use a slightly different set for the Saturday games, but I mean, completely revamp it all so that it looks like a different production. I wonder if you trick a bunch of people into thinking that it's better.
How many games are you doing? Because in the end, guys, what we're talking about is 80% of what fans want is a good game, a good broadcast, and then the 20% is the wrapping paper and the dressing of pre-games and intermissions. And I don't think you'll ever serve all the masters well enough anymore on any night of the week, no matter what network, if you are forced to be doing as many games as people expect to get on those given nights. It's a really tough challenge, trust me, because you're going to piss someone off. Yeah. And by the way, the people who like things, they don't write letters. They don't post, that was really good.
Correct.
They don't phone and compliment. It's only the people that say negative things that get a voice.
Let me ask you this: is Sportsnet producing too much hockey? Like, does the specialists from the executive producer standpoint, is it too much to make anything look special because you're making so much sausage at that point?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. Is ESPN producing too much television? I mean, and remember, Sportsnet does
but
more.
That's
than
different
hockey
brands,
too.
right? It's easy to produce a lot of sports television if it's different brands.
The answer is I don't see that. I don't see that as an issue at all. That they have enough producers, they have enough studios, they have enough intermission hosts. I don't see that as because one of the reasons is they have created a great deal of strength in Vancouver, in Edmonton, in Calgary, and to a lesser extent in the East, where they don't have near the presence that they have because TSN has the local rights, because they have big personalities. Dan Murphy and John Shorthouse are big personalities, and now the expectation is we want to see Shorty and Murph on Saturday nights. Why can't we see Shorty and Murph? Same thing has happened here at Edmonton. Jack Michaels and Gene Principe.
The tribalism is there.
Yeah.
Well, that's the famous David Hill's famous word that sports is tribal, and that becomes the real issue. So there, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, saying, well, this is bad, because there's lots of really good stuff that gets on the air as well.
We've just always talked about the NFL, Matt, about how you got every network has their own spin, their own different look on the league.
Yeah.
And I think people like that.
They only have one day. Then they only have one day a week, and that's a fair comment.
Yeah,
but they treat the 32 teams homogenously, and if you want to listen for Dallas Cowboys stuff, then you do listen to local radio. You do listen to the pregame shows on the local affiliates. The problem is hockey fans in our country, they don't want homogeneous. They only want to cheer for their own team. And we're so passionate about the game that really, I mean, if I'm a Canuck fan, I don't want to hear about the Canucks. I don't want to talk about the Canucks. I don't want to hear about Connor McDavid. I don't want to hear about Austin Matthews. I want to hear about, Jake DeBrusk and Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. And that's the real, they're the victims of their own success in so many ways, because people just want to devour so much hockey content, but they only want to see it through the eyes of their own team.
Yeah. Well, it's instructive you invoke David Hill. And for those who don't know, he's the former executive producer at Fox Sports, an Aussie who figured out how to deliver the NFL to Americans in a way that, many thought was groundbreaking, revolutionary. I wasn't particularly the biggest fan of the way Fox does it, even to this day. I'm not as big on the John Madden, Terry Bradshaw character types as some others would be, but clearly Fox found a way to deliver the NFL that was different than CBS and NBC and ABC back in the day, and have had extraordinary success. It's also funny, John, that you talk about the Leafs and being so bad as part of the Don Cherry construct, because my family moved from Alberta to Ontario, Ottawa, in the 83-84 season. And my mom tells a story about me showing up at coming up from the basement and wanting to join her dinner party. And she said, son, why aren't you watching the hockey? And I said, because it's 5-0 North Stars over the Leafs at the first intermission. And I'm just done with this, because suddenly I'd become part of the catch-all Leaf territory, right? The Senators didn't exist back then. And so you got a lot of Leafs games. But the other thing that Jonah points out, though, is innovation, John. We saw it with Prime last night. They're just showing you, with no commentators, no announcers, the whole specter of the pregame buildup to the broadcast and to puck drop. They're turning the cameras on, they're turning the microphones on, and there you go. If you want to join an hour before puck drop, you can see basically the rink and everybody getting ready. I mean, I don't know how many want to watch an empty building slowly fill up. I've certainly seen it many, many times over my life.
That's the world of streaming, though. That's the world of streaming, Matt. Is it different? Sure. I'm one of those guys too, that I tune in 10 minutes before, and then I know most of the people involved in the production. I just pray nobody says something stupid or something happens that they get embarrassed.
But is it an innovation thing with Hockey Night? Like, could they innovate more than what they do?
The wheel is round for a reason. The wheel is pretty good. It's round. Hockey Night in Canada stands for isolated replays, good storytelling, the quality of the pictures. I would tell you that there's a tradition at hockey night that has to be upheld without compromising the most important things. I want to see the puck go in the net. I want to hear my announcer say he shoots, he scores. And then I want to be told why the puck went in the net. That's it. To me, that's hockey night. To me, that is exactly what has to happen. Other people who haven't been around since 1952, other people can take the risks. Hockey night's one of those things that you can't take the risk. I joke about this a ton of times. You know, hockey night has made changes over the years, but the changes have always been gradual, Matt. And you know, we lived in a country called that had a political party called the Progressive Conservatives. Think about it, the Progressive Conservative. You know,
Blake was mentioning that the other day, actually.
When you talk to people and say, well, before the doubleheader, and people say hockey night always have a doubleheader? Well, no, isn't that innovation? You know, when we went to the overhead clock or the overhead camera above the net, we were the first ones to do that. When after Doug Beforth put them in the goals in Lillehammer, Norway, Hockey Night in Canada were the ones who brought it to North America to put net cams in. Super Slow-Mo came to hockey the first time around on Hockey Night in Canada. The digital replay system called EVS came to
Hockey Night used to innovate, is what I'm hearing, John. And while I appreciate your opinion, and frankly, I probably share it because I'm more nostalgic as well. You know, saying Hockey Night can innovate to me is kind of like what the New York Times did back in the day. We're like, wow, we're the venerable New York Times. People will always come to us. And then all of a sudden learn, no, wait a second. Even from your elevated post, you got to innovate if you're going to make it in this new technology world.
And I think that I think the use of wireless microphones and IFBs on players in warm-ups, which Hockey Night has done for the last few years. I haven't seen it this year, but they've done it before. I just, right now I think it's easy pickings to pick on Hockey Night. I think it's easy because it's the flavor. Usually there's a flavor of the week or a flavor of the month. Right now we're going to pick on Hockey Night because Hockey Night doesn't serve my market as well as my local guys do.
And in fairness, John, when ESPN, TNT, and now Amazon Prime have all onboarded to the National Hockey League, there is very much a compare and contrast juxtaposition exercise that I think the hockey fan participates in, and rightfully so, because you've got new programming there, and you say, okay, well, what makes it similar or different than what I'm used to?
I forget your answer.
And to do, not to beat a dead horse, but to do one single game with one pregame show.
For sure.
In one arena. Wow.
Just reiterate. I think you've told us recently, but just reiterate on the new deal, the new TV deal. Is it both networks or is it just Rogers?
What? I'm sorry.
On the next national rights deal, is it both networks or is it just
and Prime? He thinks.
Is it just more mistaken?
Well, I fully expect, and this is my personal opinion. I expect to see national games on Bell, national games on Rogers, and national games on a streaming service. And I think we're going that way, and we should get used to it.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Frozen Frenzy? 16 games, only time this year all 32 teams are playing on the same day, 7.5 hours of continuous hockey, staggered start times with an ESPN triple header.
Well, the other side of that is that I wondered why we only had one game Monday and one game Wednesday. Because we got 16 games on Tuesday. So that's one aspect to look at. Hey, listen, if you're trying to create opportunities on the news cycle to have some fun with it, try it every once in a while. Just don't affect the outcome of games. And I think it's worth a chance. There's I got to remember my numbers. There's more than 1,300 regular season games. We shouldn't make too much of a night with 16.
I don't know why they wouldn't do this on a weekend as well, though. Like, and I know
Well,
you got way
because-
more competition, but
Because everybody wants home game. Everybody wants home games on weekends, Blake.
yeah.
And if you do 16, you're not going to be able. You're not going to put teams 3 games in 3 nights. So you got
Friday
a real
and Sunday
dilemma.
are compromised.
Friday
in
and
terms
Sunday
of home
become
dates.
tremendously compromised.
Yeah,
like Monday and Wednesday.
Post NFL season, do it on a Sunday then. Everybody can play on Friday as well.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Yeah,
Everything I think with the way that the networks are, because they're creative, trying to create opportunities too. I think everything's up for discussion.
What I've learned on this hit is we should lock Shannon and Price in a room and have them come out with a new model for presenting hockey.
I'm game. I think that between the two of us, we can figure this out. I agree.
The wheel is still round.
It's still round.
Progressive conservative.
That's my. I tell my American friends that story, Blake, all the time, and they look at me and they think about it. Progressive conservatives. Okay.
Yeah. Although some of the things Mulrooney did were in fact progressive, that like no conservative would take on in today's day and age.
And I'm not talking anything about BC politics today. So
Hey. We'll let you know here in a week or so how it turned out, John. Thanks for this. Catch up next Tuesday.